On air. Good morning, everyone. I'm happy to welcome you from Digital Innovation and Digital Art for Climate Pavilion at COP27. This is the second week of most important climate conference of the world, and it is my great pleasure to inaugurate one more event, Polkadot Hour, bringing Web3 to climate conference and UNFCCC process. And today we have a very special guest, Christine Mohan, VP of Business Development at KILT Protocol. Christine has 25 years of experience in hardware, software, emerging technology, and digital media, including the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal. Formerly, she co-founded several media blockchain platforms, and she was a CMO of the Web3 Foundation, the entity that launched Polkadot. Currently, Christine is driving enterprise and ecosystem adoption for KILT protocol, and very important note, she is an advocate for diversity in tech, and I'm very excited to welcome a woman in Web3 to give a presentation on digital identity. We have discussed digital identity here at the Innovation Pavilion in the past 2 weeks. It is one of the very important solutions to ensure that Web3 will be used in a democratic and right way. And today, Christine will deliver a keynote on why digital identity is broken, and most importantly, how we can fix it. Christine, please, it is a word to you.
Yes, thank you, Arena, and thank you very much for inviting me to speak at this conference. It's an honor to be here. So I'll start with a brief overview of what digital identity is. I can't see the slides, but I'm just going to push forward. Digital identity, many people would, when you think about digital identity, you think it's perhaps, you would think, okay, it might be my driver's license, it might be the passport that I show when I go to, to the airport in that lovely process. So this would be great. Slide 2, wonderful. Okay, here we go. So what identity is not, to begin with. The word is actually really important. Culturally, we think about it as being your passport, your driver's license. It's something that you show. But this is actually not your identity. It's an identifier. It's a credential. So basically, there are two parts to identity. Identity is made up of identifiers plus credentials. And identifiers are things that are given to you at birth. They're inherited to you. They cannot be taken away. They are your face, your fingerprint, your signature. And there is no government involved in issuing your face. And so when we think about identity, we really need to think about both of these components. And they're very important when you think about both physical identity and digital identity. Now, these are not terms that we use very often. It was very new to me coming to KILT to learn about identifiers. But we all know credentials. And so these are issued by trusted entities. It might be your university. It might be your state government for your driver's license. And they issue these, and they include your identifier. They include typically your face, your signature, and sometimes your fingerprint. But you have ultimately control over these. They are in your wallet. They are in maybe a drawer at your house. You save your diploma. You show it when you want to and how you want to. And what's interesting about physical credentials is they are very privacy preserving, that the government that issued your driver's license does not know every time you show it at a bar. The government does not know every time you show your passport when you're traveling. And so that means that identity transactions like this are quite privacy preserving and scalable, and even more so in some ways than the digital world. And so KILT, I'll explain a little bit later what KILT does, but we basically bring this credentials model from the physical to the digital world. So what's interesting that's happened over time in Web 2, which is the current internet, it is kind of dismantled this very basic properties of digital identity. You really should hold these same standards as you move from physical identity and credentials into digital. But what's happened is actually over time, Google, Facebook, Amazon, these large monopolies have actually taken control of our identity They become the identity provider. They decide kind of who and where to show it to, or you use them as an intermediary to access other services. So we have become very accustomed over the last 10 or 15 years to signing in. It's very convenient when you see that pop-up button, sign in with Facebook, sign in with Google. But I would really start thinking about that process. It's easy, it's convenient. However, each time you do, your data is being captured and then potentially monetized, shared, and used in ways that you're no longer aware of. And so you're not really in control of your credentials that way. They've been used and now they're being aggregated and monetized. So these are things to think about. And it's really important as we move into more and more government initiatives that are going to actually, unfortunately, start following this model. It's a model that works, right? Facebook, now Meta, has made quite a bit of money on our data. Business model is built on our data. And so these models do work, but not from a consumer or a security point of view. So what you're seeing now is what we call a top-down trust model. So you as the user, when you want to use an online service, you have to go through the cloud service. You have to go through the platform, whether that's Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, sign in with them, and then your information is transmitted to the service, the verifier, whoever you want to use online. But in the meantime, your data, your keys are trapped in this silo. And then again, you don't know where that data goes from there. So probably you've heard about Web3. There's a lot of talk about it, especially in the last year. I think it was the most searched term in January of this year. So it's really become a little bit more aware in the mainstream. But the original vision, it's really important to remember. Like some people, and I've been to a lot of conferences this year on Web3 Summit, Web Summit a couple of weeks ago. Irina was there as well. I wanted to go to the Web3 track, and it was all metaverse, 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 presentation one after the other. And that is one aspect of Web3, but what really you want to get back to the core ideals and mission of Web3, which is really the next version of the internet. It is a decentralized internet. It's a fair internet. It returns to the original vision of what the internet could be, where users control your own data and basically your destiny. And so if you think of Web 1, you may have seen this flow. People describe it in different ways, but Web 1 is basically read. It was very much of a broadcast model, so you might be reading a website, reading a blog. Web 2 is more, I'd say, more engaging, more interactive. You could actually discuss. That's when discussion boards and things like Facebook popped up, and comments, and much more engagement. And then Web 3 is the next iteration. And these don't go away. You still have Web 1, you still have Web 2, and now you're layering on Web 3, which is actually owned. So it's owning your own data, potentially owning and self-publishing your content. So the idea of a decentralized web comes from the idea of governance, which is also a pretty new concept. So when we decentralized our protocol, when you decentralize a blockchain, that means you are giving over. So we built the blockchain, we built a parachain on Polkadot, which is a large shared security blockchain that I'll talk about in a minute. It's a layer 1, similar to Ethereum or Bitcoin. So basically, for a decentralized protocol to work fully, you build it, you have your dev team put it together, test it, you push it live, and then slowly over time, you remove your control over it, and then you turn the governance over to the community. The community votes on changes for your chain and the direction it moves in. It's really exciting, but it's certainly a lot of work. And with any type of independence comes, you really need more responsibility. So it's much more self-sovereign. And again, like I said, not just the metaverse. So what we're talking now is much more of a user-centric model. The user is in the middle. You own your own keys, you own your credentials, and you decide who is going to actually see them. You can actually then, when we talk about how this identity is basically works and interacts with blockchain, you see that below, that at the different phases of actually someone confirming your identity, confirming your credentials, they actually, what you're seeing is you would put a hash that represents the validity of your credential. You are not putting your information on the blockchain. You're putting a small portion of it that represents this information. And that is what a verifier would look at and be able to say, yes, this is Christine Mohan, this is her passport. So again, it's very much user-centric, user at the middle, in control of your data and who and when you share it with. So it's important that this is not just something that's popped up in the last year or so. Identity standards have been developed over the last 5 years through the Decentralized Identity Foundation, which is a group or a consortium of about 300 companies, large and small, corporate, blockchain, and they recognize the real importance of needing to create a standard for digital identifiers, for verifiable credentials that we'll talk about in a bit. But without these standards, you really can't have any type of interoperability across chains. You could create an identity standard on KILT that didn't work on Ethereum, that didn't work on Cosmos. And it's really important for this to work, that all of these types of identity models work together and that they follow a standard. And unfortunately, what we're seeing is some of these newer models, some of these government initiatives are not following this standard. They're saying, oh, it's not ready yet. But over 5 years of research, it's ready and it's being used. And it's actually also recognized by W3C, which is the same entity that recognized all the standards we're very familiar with that we use every day, HTML, HTTP. And KILT has been, when we present and when we meet with people, we're definitely recognized as one of the few initiatives that are adhering to these standards. And it's really important as more and more identity projects come along and come live, that they really do also follow the standards, or again, it'll be really a jumble of initiatives and protocols and blockchains that do not talk to each other, and that's not going to help for mainstream and enterprise adoption. So what is KILT? We're, again, decentralized, a blockchain identity protocol. And so we basically issue through the blockchain self-sovereign DIDs, or decentralized identifiers that we talked about, and then verifiable credentials. And then so what we're basically doing is bringing this trust model that you expect and you use every day with your license, with your credentials, your diploma, we're bringing that to the digital world. And then also it's important to know that identity is just not for human beings, so to speak. Your pet could have an identity. Services, machines, digital assets, NFTs, all of these have identities. And so all of these can fit into a framework and actually have a DID of its own. So that gets pretty interesting. What is a DID? Think about it as a digital fingerprint for Web3. So it's a way to identify yourself across different services, different chains that you use, whether or not you're a tech person. It looks like this long string. And later on, I'll talk about a way that KILT actually developed a way to make it human readable, so you can actually customize your DID. But it's using cryptographic techniques to prove the ownership. So that's the verifiable piece of it. And then it does not depend on any centralized controller, any centralized government. And so that way it's decentralized. And then the second piece is verifiable credentials. So basically, these are the two terms, the two frameworks for digital identity, the DIDs and the verifiable credentials. So these are like digital certificates. They are representing your physical certificates. You store them in a wallet and you store them on your own device. And that's critical because that means you own the keys and you control how you share them. And there's also one technique that we think is quite important is you could have a credential and then decide you don't want to share every bit of it. Maybe a service you want to use only needs to know that your age or only needs to know your geography. You could actually, rather than sending, if you think about services that you use, or even when you're verifying, like for employment, you have to send quite a bit of data, or even healthcare, you have to send all of your information, and maybe they just need your blood type. So there's what's called self-selective disclosure. You can actually take a piece of your identity and just show that. And that actually keeps your data much more secure, and there's less of your data floating around. And then again, you choose who to send them with, and then the verifier would decide, do I trust the issuer? Does this verifier, in order to use my service, do they actually trust that the government issued this? Or maybe it's a social media credential, do they understand that Twitter issued this? And then again, one interesting part is credentials can also be revocable. So maybe your license expires over time, and that also transfers into the digital world. All of these things are quite similar. So when we talk about KILT and Polkadot, what's really important is for blockchain to really grow and really hit a new level of adoption. It's important that it becomes easier and more efficient for business to adopt it and you to start using blockchain every day. And so we decided to build on Polkadot, which is unlike some other chains, it actually has very much lower and predictable transaction costs, which is really important for enterprise. You cannot start to adopt blockchain technology and not know how much a transaction is going to cost you day to day. It can't change. It can't be too volatile, or else it's very difficult to construct a business model around that. So we're also really excited that Polkadot was seen as having the lowest total electricity consumption per year as compared to other similar types of blockchain, proof of stake blockchains. And so again, all these things combined make KILT a scalable solution for enterprise, for businesses to think about using, makes it efficient, and also then highly interoperable. That's the point of Polkadot. Parachains actually stand for parallel chains, parallel blockchains, and so these are working together and highly interoperable, which means we get to tap the really interesting projects that are being built all across the Polkadot ecosystem, whether that's storage, NFTs, metaverse, all of this can work together. And identity is a pretty core layer and a core infrastructure layer for many projects. So it's really going to power our growth in the next 2 years. So specifically, how can you use KILT for enterprise? So we are in the process of integrating KILT technology with a few of the larger accounting firms, a large media company. We'll be announcing that in the next month or so. And how they're going to use it is there's actually a concept of reusable credentials. So rather than every time you go to a bank, every time you go to maybe an exchange, and you have to do your KYC or know your customer, that is only used once. You pay for it once, the entity uses it once. And so what's actually more interesting for the user and also the business is that the concept of a reusable credential, that you could keep it and then use it across either multiple banks or multiple exchanges, multiple DEXs. And then the other side is data storage. So KILT does not store any data. It doesn't store, like I said, it stores a hash of the data, which is only a piece of the information that doesn't give away any personal info. So when media companies started getting into the game of data, collecting data they wanted to know, and I came from the New York Times, so we slowly went from collecting your zip code, and then it was gender, and then it was household income, and it became more and more. And then, of course, the ad networks started collecting a lot of behavioral data. And so all of these things, media companies started collecting quite a bit of data, and sometimes that data lived in different departments. And so with GDPR, you actually have the ability to say, I want my data, I want it deleted, and I want to see that it's been deleted. And so for a media company to go across many databases in their company is actually quite an onerous task. It's difficult, it takes time. And so by using something like KILT to sign in to a website, you as a user could say, I just want to confirm and verify my email address. That's all the media company needs for me to sign in. That's all the media company wants. They do not want to be in the data business of collecting and storing this data. So that's an interesting use case, very interesting. You'll be seeing more of that from KILT. And then again, it's important that we're following a standard, that perhaps a large company wants to use a couple of different identity protocols and identity initiatives, and we can be consistent and interoperable with these. The other piece is, as we know, crypto, if you've tried to buy crypto, excuse me, it's not always easy. It's quite a long process. It's a new idea, digital wallets. So not all consumers might be ready to actually engage in this process. And so what we're doing at KILT is building a fiat on-ramp. Excuse me for a sec. Sorry, got a little cough today. We are intentionally building our services to be very user-friendly, whether that's for the enterprise or for the consumer. We're using a JavaScript SDK, which means you don't need a lot of blockchain code to actually build an application. We are white labeling our wallet, so different companies could put their own branding on it. And then we're actually using a fiat on-ramp. So you could actually, excuse me, be able to go on and use KILT and not have to interact and buy and sell crypto. And so that is actually going to make it also easier for enterprises, because they won't need to have different tax structures for the crypto. So keeps everyone happy. So also it's important that KILT has been working with different government use cases, most recently with Dana, which is the Federal Energy Agency for Germany. And basically, we're using KILT here, and we're working with them to adopt KILT for digital and decentralized identities for energy generating devices. So basically, they're using KILT, and you can see through the chart, the DID is there, verifiable credentials, and then that's how it's used for the machine identity. And again, these cross-industry consortium efforts are really important. You can see SAP is working on it, Ernst & Young, Parity, the developer originally of KILT, of Substrate, of Kusama, of Polkadot, all these chains that are core. And so it's a really cross-industry initiative, and we're really excited to see it come to fruition. So I would say on the other side, there are a couple of government misuse cases, so to speak. EIDIS is a initiative that's been underway for a few years now, and it's in now phase 2, which involves also wallets. So as we talked about before, in the physical world, the government will issue your credential, right? And that includes your identifier, your face, your fingerprint, your signature. But what they don't do is own that. So again, that same process was working really well in the physical world. And with the new initiative the government is looking at in the EU, the government would issue the identifier. They would hold it, they would store it. It's dangerous for a lot of reasons, because as regimes change, maybe the political party changes, that data is not going away. It's not like in the US, if a Republican, then it's a Democratic president, and all of a sudden all that data is washed clean. No, that data is retained into the next political party. It lasts for years and years in these government databases. And that's kind of not only not safe, you don't know how it's being used, but also, what if they don't like, for instance, your religion? There's a change in regime. That could become a dangerous tool for them. It could also be something that they delete, and then you wouldn't have access necessarily to things like healthcare. So it's really important that we watch this initiative, and we really want to shine a light on it with the identity implications there. So again, this idea of the government ID initiatives, it's an older idea. It follows this centralized database, in which we know there's now new technologies like blockchain that they could be using. They could be using identity standards, like the Decentralized Identity Foundation has established. And again, it's going to be something that collects quite a bit of your data. It's going to be, quote, convenient to do your online banking, e-signatures, tax filing, all within the system. We see similar initiatives in India where you have one ID number that actually lets you access many, many national services, government services. But again, this is really what you call a honeypot for hackers. All of this data times the country, millions of people, times millions of data points. That's actually really attractive for a hacker. And it's one attack and the gain is quite huge. And with the government holding your keys, that makes it even more dangerous. But in if you look at decentralized identity solutions like KILT, excuse me, you would have to attack individuals one over the other in order to get to those millions. So it's really not to the gain of a hacker to go in and hack one wallet. It's the same effort, but not the same return. So again, we really would like to be very vocal about this, that these wallets are being developed over the next 2 years. It's really important for consumers to understand the different aspects. And again, we have to be careful about things that are convenient, because also those are things that often are not so great when it comes to control of our data. So what we've done at KILT, as I said, is build a couple of applications built on our protocol that are easy to use, that are basically employing all of these decentralized identity solutions. And I'll run through them very quickly. You have a wallet where you can actually store your identity. You would need 2 KILT to do that. As I said, we're also building a fiat on-ramp, so you wouldn't necessarily need to buy with KILT or crypto, but an enterprise could offer it to their employees. And social KYC is interesting in that you can prove that you have control over your social media account. So if you could sign into different services this way. And it's also a nice compliant way for GDPR logins. But again, it forgets about the information after we issue the credential. So again, that's another core tenet of KILT. We don't hold the data, you hold it. And then there's actually an interesting, very easy to use service, kind of like a Web 2 signing service you might use for documents. But what's interesting is this one, you can sign any type of file. It could be an audio file, it could be a PDF, it could be software. And again, it's browser to browser, so there's no storage by KILT of your data. We do not keep all the contracts you've just signed. You keep them, and you can verify and make sure that the file has not been changed when you send it back and forth. So super easy to use, convenient, drag and drop. And again, it's really important for blockchain to move forward to be very user-friendly. And here is the way that you can actually, instead of having that long string for your decentralized identifier, you can actually customize it to be Ingo, which is our CEO, W3 and Christine. And that way, when I'm signing my documents, someone knows that it's me. And I can also attach my credentials. I can attach my email address, my Twitter account, so they actually know this really is me that is signing the document or the contract. And that's it. I will turn it over back to Irina and see if you have any questions. But thanks very much for hosting me.
This was an incredibly interesting presentation. Do we have any questions in the audience? Miroslav, I actually wanted you to say a couple of words about the solution that we were discussing these days in implementing SDGs and linking it to your digital identity, and how important it is to build a history of your climate actions, positive impact you create in society and for the environment, and you document this journey of climate action that becomes relevant for generations and can actually be combined in the form of NFT as well as digital identity. Please, Miroslav.
Thank you very much, Irina. Thank you very much, Christine, for this excellent presentation. So, the name of my organization is International Association for the Advancement of Innovative Approaches to Global Challenges. And somehow the logic why we have created our organization is that the existing response mechanism of global community to the global challenges, especially the climate crisis, but also many other global common good provision challenges, is not functioning well. And the key is that we don't have the innovation system which would include all the relevant stakeholders. We don't know, because with climate change, emissions and everything, every one of us is a driver of this challenge. And all our decisions, resource use decisions, mobility decisions, nutrition or food decisions, everything adds up to the global climate crisis. And in order that we as global community function better, we have to have a better understanding of who is doing what, and then capturing the value of a certain action, of a certain decision, whether it contributes to these global goals, and then to provide the necessary incentive mechanisms, rewarding with financial incentives or gamification, or just telling people that you make the right decisions, it will be documented, it will be recognized, and you can turn these actions and action outcomes into digital assets which you can collect, NFTs. And we are delighted to have Unique Network as our NFT technology partner, who is providing the tech solution for this. And so people will be able to collect badges, NFTs about their verified and certified climate actions. And a key element is unique identification of stakeholders, but also of objects. For instance, if there is existing fossil fuel-driven energy supply system, we should identify it with a certain identifier, and then manage those actions and communities which are going to enable the transformation of this fossil fuel-based system to renewable energy. And so unique identification is the key for a functioning society. And KILT protocol, you are following the standards, the industry standards of the community, and that's very important, so that the solutions are interoperable, and so we certainly want to explore possibilities how we can work with you on this. A concrete example, so it's not just a dream, but what we are doing here is we have the Digital Art for Climate initiative. We are telling the creatives, the artists, that your contribution is valuable. And so we are then setting up a global changes action registry, which has currently it's just the name, but in the future artists will be able to identify with their digital identities, and then you have in the registry the actions, the resources, and the projects and the project outcomes. So at the end, an artist uniquely identified with the digital identity will have the possibility to claim and to state that a certain impact has been made possible by the contribution of an artwork. So this is one example how digital identity in the context of artists, artwork, and climate action empowerment is relevant. And now back to Elena. I hope it was not too confusing.
Thank you so much, Miroslav. Christina, a few closing remarks after this powerful speech. Your message to the governments, because today we have all countries represented. Our pavilion is right in front of the Food and Agriculture organizations of the UN. We have Global Innovation Hub in our neighborhood. So the world is watching. Christina, what was your message for the governments in relation to blockchain and digital identification on blockchain usage?
That we are really excited to collaborate and to really incorporate the standards that have been developed with government, with enterprise, with startups to move digital identity forward in a way that's safe and secure for consumers.
Thank you so much, Christine, for joining us today. For everybody, thank you for joining Polkadot Hour. We're pleased here. Come build with us, follow us on social media, and see you soon at our next event. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you for joining us live and online. Thanks, Christine. Okay. Broadcast. Okay.